Joseph Booton is a puppeteer and actor who is directing his first play at the Archway Theatre in Horley. It's a day in the death of Joe Egg. I met with Joseph and we had quite a wide-ranging discussion. We first spoke about the play and I asked him what it was about.
It's a dark comedy, so there'll be laughs for everyone in it, that's for sure. But what's quite nice is it tackles a very difficult subject. It's about a couple that are raising a child that is severely disabled, they're wheelchair bound, and they suffer from cerebral palsy. And it tackles the idea of whether it's fair to allow someone to be kept alive by modern medicine, and is it being done for the benefit of the family or actually for the benefit of the child. And what's nice about it is it does tackle some really difficult and perhaps controversial subjects, but it's written by a playwright who's actually had a child who suffered from cerebral palsy. So unfortunately Peter Nichols passed away only just a couple of years ago. He was 92, and it's sad really that we put on the play, and a couple of weeks prior to that he's passed away. But he went on to have 3 other children, but one of his daughters, which is what the experience of this play is based on, she unfortunately died at the age of 12, possibly 11, don't quote me on that, but it was either 11 or 12. And he makes a very strong point that the parents in the play are not a reflection of him and his wife. Rather what they are is they're a culmination of all the people that they've interacted with during their time with the daughter and all the viewpoints that came across whilst he was with her. But it's done in a very sensitive way, and it's a real thought provoker, but it's not really dour, and depressing and drawn out. It's got that comedy in it, and that's his writing style. He presents the ideas, but in a very dark, comedic way, which is what keeps it entertaining, I think. And it's got an absolute smashing ending, which is worth going to see just for that.
You say you got a small cast, just 6 people, but how have they found playing their roles, and did they do any research for them?
Yeah, they all have. So especially Isaac, who's playing the son with cerebral palsy. There's a lot of physicality in that role, and you have to get it right. You don't want that. You don't want to cross that fine line of making it too much of a caricature, and you don't want to cross the fine line of not doing it justice. And he's got it smack on bang right there, and he's done research on that, and we've worked together on the physicality of that. So I think that's been a interesting experience for him. The 2 parents, played by Howard Miller and Mandy Humphries, they are really difficult roles because Mandy and Howard, they do run the first act themselves. It's pretty much just a 2-hander. Isaac Witherden's in there as Joe, the child, but it's really down to them to run the act, and that's 50 minutes odd of just the 2 of them on stage, and that in itself is a challenge, let alone getting to Act 2 and having to run Act 2 as well. So for them I think that's been an interesting experience as well, and a good challenge as well. And then in Act 2 we also bring in 3 other characters. So we bring in the friends of the parents, played by Jan Sparks and Tom Howland, and we also bring in the mother-in-law. And Tom and Jan have had difficult parts, I think, especially Jan, because her character represents the somewhat more drastic or extreme views on what we should do with children who have severe disabilities. And again, it's in no way a reflection of her own thoughts, but it's an interesting vehicle for discussion, and it's a hard part to play, I think, because if you do things really well, you should encompass all areas of thought, however extreme or drastic we might personally think. That's the basis and the foundation of a good discussion.
I guess when you're playing a certain role as an actor, even if you don't agree with the character or the views of that character, it can be quite difficult to get into the zone and just then read reviews back on yourself. And you think, well, wait a minute, that's the character I'm playing, but I don't actually agree with that.
Yeah, that's true.
Quite conflicting, I guess.
It is, yeah. So Mandy Humphrey, who plays the wife, has probably views that I would say are probably more acceptable in the mainstream. and her counterpart, Howard Miller, who plays her husband, and their female friend, who's played by Jan Sparks, have views that are equally as valid, but perhaps are not so accepted in the mainstream as maybe they will be in the future. Who knows? And it must be quite difficult for them. And I think that's, in some ways, that's more of a challenging role for an actor, because you've got to sell that idea, really. You know, in order to make your character believable, you've got to really, even if you don't personally believe in that idea, you've got to embellish that and accept that and pitch that to the audience as if, you know, this is my character, this is what I believe. But, you know, it is a character, it's not necessarily representative of your own viewpoints, but that is a challenge when you're saying things that you really don't perhaps personally agree with. But that's what acting's all about. It's all about putting different viewpoints forward and playing people that you would never have any association with in your life. And that's where the challenge comes from, I think.
So you as a director, what would you like the audience to take away from this play?
I think a sense of open-mindedness about how we go forward in the future in regards to helping people who perhaps want to end their lives, or what we should do with people who are unable to make that decision but are perhaps in obvious suffering and pain.
During this interview, we spoke about the issues of euthanasia and the playwright Peter Nichols, his approach to this subject.
What I like about this play is it's not someone who sat down and gone, okay, I've got these interesting different philosophical viewpoints, I'm going to write a play about it. It's someone who's actually gone through this, who's writing this play and is presenting viewpoints that I'm sure they don't personally agree with, but they're presenting all the viewpoints that they've come across, and they're allowing people to have their own opinion, because that's where the discussion starts. It doesn't start from, this is what we must do, I'm going to write a play about this and look at how bad people are who have this viewpoint. It's a play that's written about, you know, from his own experiences. These are all the viewpoints I've come across. What do we think? And that's where the discussion comes from. And I think, first of all, just having that discussion about a topic that is so difficult to talk about is really important. But also to answer the question of, do we have the right to make that decision? And how do we know that they're suffering and pain just because they can't communicate with us? How, you know, and it's a really interesting point, and it's one I think we'll continue to discuss for many decades to come before we land on a solution, if indeed we ever do. And I think when we do, we'll look back on it and we'll go, this is my own personal view, you know, we'll look back on it and we'll go, well, why didn't we make that decision sooner? You know, things like giving women the vote, you know, legalising homosexuality. Now we look at that and we accept that that is just part of our society, and we look back on times when homosexuality was illegal, and when women didn't have the vote, and we go, you know, that's nuts. How could there ever have been a time like that? And perhaps, you know, we're now in the time where we're going to shift, where we go back and we look and we go, how can society have allowed people who are in such clear distress and suffering to be kept alive artificially? And whose benefit is it for? And we seem to have accepted the fact that, you know, when you've got an animal, it's kinder to put the animal down than to make it go through this operation, or do this or do that. But with people, we still haven't shifted into that mindset. And I appreciate, although some pet owners will argue very strongly against this, and I would be one of them, that because it's an animal, it's slightly easier choice. It hasn't got the same emotional attachment as a person. But I think it does. You know, anyone who's a pet owner who's invested a lot of time and has a severe emotional attachment, is when you come to that decision of, do I put this pet through this operation or do I put them down? It is like losing a family member. It's a real difficult struggle. But I think those who accept that actually, okay, it's time for the pet to pass away, they've had a good life, it's unfair to keep them alive, to put them through this, do so with an understanding of, it's not me that's wanted to keep them alive, it's the best thing for the animal, and it's kinder to let them go. We don't do that with people. It's very easy for me as an outsider to say that, but when it's your own mother or your father or your daughter or your son, it's obviously a lot harder and a lot complicated, and the legal minefield of it is it's something that I can't even comprehend. But it's good we're having that discussion. I'd like people to have that discussion about it and just be a bit more open-minded and view different points of view. Now, I'll make very clear, I still don't have a view either way, but what I think is really important is that we have a discussion.
I spoke to Joseph about his role as director for this play.
So how did you find directing it? Did you find it difficult at all?
Yeah, it was very difficult. It was my first time doing it, and I was really up for the challenge. I've really enjoyed directing, but it's all the other things that come with being a director. So when things go wrong, it's picking up the pieces. The lighting and sound designer had to pull out because he was needed elsewhere in another production. So I had to find another lighting and sound designer, which actually, thankfully, the current lighting and sound designer, or one of the three, was really helpful and pivotal in doing that, was able to pick that up. And then one of the cast, unfortunately for medical reasons, had to drop out with about 4 weeks to go.
Oh dear.
And on top of that, she was also doing the costumes for the play as well. So double whammy. But it's all finally come together. I'm really proud with how all the actors have done and how everyone behind the scenes has pulled together. So that in itself has been a challenge. And on top of all that, you've got to actually direct the play as well. So when you're trying to do your actual main job, you've got all these other things going on as well in the background. So it's a lot of work. You know, you have to work with everyone. You have to work with the lighting and sound designer. You have to work with the set designer. You have to work with the master painter to get your colour scheme. You have to work with the person doing your costumes. You have to work with all sorts of different people. You have to put the programme together, so you're working with the marketing team. It's a lot of work. And then on top of that, you've got to direct the play itself. So it's been a challenge.
I guess, like with any job, there's always going to be pitfalls, and people come along to see the end product. They don't realise what actually goes on. Like you said, people pulling out, or people having to, or moving on. It's you don't realise what goes on behind the scenes. But I guess, as they say, that is show business.
Well, exactly, and the show must go on, and you've just got to persevere. And if you have faith, it does come together in the end when you have these hiccups.
So as a director, and well, for the first time directing a play, what have you learned from the experience?
I've learnt that sometimes you can't direct everything. You have to let things go. You can't be a control freak. It's like the famous saying, isn't it, where I can't remember that again. I can't remember the name of it. You know, where the prayer where we say, you know, God grant me the wisdom to change what I can and accept what I can't change. I can't remember the exact words, but you know exactly what I mean. And it's the same with directing as well. You need to be given the wisdom the confidence to change what you know you can change, and the wisdom to know that there are some things you can't change. Don't try. And you, as a director, have to take all these elements, bring them together, and your job is to give them all the tools so that they can perform the best. You know, you give the actors the direction, you give them the set, you give them the costume, you give them the props, you give them as much as you can do. And you know, this is an amateur production. This is a charity. We don't have unlimited resources, so you have to be quite creative in that sense as well. Did I enjoy it? Was that the question? I think.
What have you learned from this experience?
What I learned from it. I've learned actually that a lot of the things when you're on stage acting don't actually really matter, and a lot of it is your own nerves and your own self-awareness taking over. And when you're acting or when you're rehearsing, you always think, oh, I worry about this, or I worry about that, or I worry about that. And from a director's point of view, actually, most of it looks perfectly fine. And I think just having that trust in the director that if something is wrong, they will tell you. Don't try and second guess what's going on in their mind. Don't try and second guess that there's something wrong and the director hasn't picked up on it yet, because it does look fine. Because when someone's looking at a stage production as a whole, as an audience, as a member of the audience, there are small things that they don't see that you as an actor know, oh, got that wrong, or oh, I didn't quite do this right. Really, it doesn't matter. And I think as long as you're there to support other people and to make sure the show as a whole goes forward, that's the most important thing.
The Archway Theatre in Horley. I wondered how well it is or isn't known about in the town.
It's amazing the number of people who come there who are from Horley itself, never mind coming from further afield, who have lived there for maybe 20, 30, even 40 years and have never been to the theatre. And it's absolutely astonishing. It's in its 67th year, so there's no excuse really for people in the local area who have been there for that amount of time not to have gone there, and it's a shame really, because it is a charity, and we do rely on the support from the community to go. So, if you're listening to this and you haven't been, make the effort, go out, go see a production, because it's amazing. And there's 10 shows a year, so there's always something on that you'll like. There's a pantomime every year. There's all sorts. It's really worth going to have a look at, and you might even find that you really like an aspect of it and you want to get involved with it, and it gives you the opportunity to do that.
Well, I've been in Redhill 15 years, and until I'd spoken to you, I'd never heard of the Archway Theatre. So
No, a lot of people haven't. It's a shame, and perhaps that's something we need to work on more with our marketing. We do put previews, and if the Arts Editor can come out, reviews in the West Sussex County Times, so that's got a large distribution base as well. And we also use the social media avenues as well, but we do rely on, like anything really, a lot of word of mouth. And it's important that if people have been there, that they talk about it to other people. And it's just such a great venue and a great opportunity and something great to have. You're not going to get the council funding this. No. They don't have the funding anyway. And if they did, they'd probably decide it was better spent elsewhere. So it's really important that if people want this, they need to show the support for it and go there. But what's even more heart-wrenching is that a lot of people don't know it's there, as I've said, and it's really important to get the word out. But what continually amazes me about the Archway is when you go there, it's very... It borders on professional, really. It's not your typical Amdram company in a church/village hall. It's a proper purpose-built theatre. It's great. It's amazing. There's a workshop there where we build every single set from scratch. There's a whole costume store that does private rentals as well. There's a great team of people. There's professional sound, lighting gear set up. We've just had some brand new seats installed in there, and it's got such a treasure trove of all sorts of things in there.
Joseph Booton, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tess.